Alright, welcome back. We're going to be doing a top 10 spells video today of the new Monster Train 2 spells that we have to play with here. Now, I'm actually recording this on release day, and so changes might happen between now and whenever you end up viewing this video, so of course these cards might get rebalanced in the future, but as of now, this is my thoughts on what the top 10 are. Now, when I say top 10, I have kind of a loose way that I am going to rate them. I'm basically going to rate them on 4 different things. I'm going to rate them heavily on takeability, so that's just when I see it in the 3 cards that are offered to me. How likely is it that I can just fit it right into my deck without having to do much speculation, or even if I do have to speculate on it, how likely is it for it to work out? And then we'll rate it on the ceiling. That's like we find every upgrade that we want for it, and we end up with the perfect situation for it. We end up with the right deck for it. How does it perform in that case? And then conversely, the floor. How does it perform if we never upgrade it, or if we just don't ever end up getting the right situation for the card, even though we took it, right? So let's say we speculated and there's nothing really worked out, or something better came along. What value does it provide to the deck in that case? And then the final thing we will rate it on is the median. That's just kind of an ambiguous, how does it typically do when I don't find the nuts, but I also find a little bit of what I want for it. Maybe I find one of the upgrades I want for it. Maybe I find somewhat of the situation that I want for it, but the stars don't completely align. How does it perform in that case? So that's the 4 things I'm going to rate them on. And I'm going to do them loosely in order from 10th best up to the first best. I'm not like super confident in the ordering here, other than I'm very confident that the number 1 pick is my number 1 pick. It's like very solidly my favorite card in the game. So let's get it started here. We're going to take a look at the logbook. And let's start with, let's see, when I go to spells. First one on this list is from the Lazarus League, which is my favorite clan in the game. And let's see, where is it? Here, Mixology. This is just a very solid card. Mix is a very important mechanic to learn if you want to get good with Lazarus League. And I can do maybe a Lazarus sort of guide at some point. I definitely want to, because they're my favorite clan in the game, but I won't really get too much into like how to make, how to use Mix, because there's a lot there, but it's just a very versatile card. It's something that can provide offense, it's something that can provide defense, it's something that can provide utility. It can be removal, it can be stall, it can be a game plan, it can really just do anything. So I'm going to rate this one takeability of 8. The only reason I wouldn't give it a higher takeability rating is it costs 2, and as a 2 cost, it's not amazing, I would say. It really wants to, at the very least, get some Ember upgrades, or, some additional ones. And I'm going to list what the desirable upgrades are for each of these cards as well after I rate them. The ceiling, I'm going to give it an 8. I don't think it has necessarily a gigantic ceiling, like it's not going to solo carry a run necessarily, but it's just going to provide generally a lot of value. And the ceiling would be that I get, some Ember reductions, I suppose I could get the artifact that gives me additional mix choices so that I'm always getting what I want. That would be kind of the situation for the ceiling. And then the floor, I'm going to give it a 7. You know, the floor is, I took it, but maybe I never got around to upgrading it. And what does it do in that case? Well, it's not the worst thing in the world to just spend 2 Ember and get 2 mixes. Like, that's still going to be valuable. And then we'll give it a median of 8. Kind of ambiguously, it's just always going to be solid no matter what. Regardless if I find the nuts or not. You know, if I simply just reduce its cost to 1, it's going to be pretty good. And so the upgrades you're looking at for it are typically just going to be an Ember reduction, a holdover. Holdover can be good because a lot of times you might be wanting to stack, like reanimate with it or something. And then a spell chain. If you have an Ember upgrade already, then a spell chain is pretty good. That just makes it so you get 4 different mixes out of the card. That's just a really valuable thing. So that's coming in at number 10 is Mixology. Then we're going to go over to the Banished clan, and Rising Rage is going to be our 9th pick here. Now, from Monster Train 1, we know that Hidden Passage is a really good card, right? Well, this is basically Hidden Passage, but maybe a little bit better in most cases. There are some cases where the advance is a downside, so it's not like objectively better than Hidden Passage, but I would say if I were to ballpark it, maybe roughly 75% of the time the advance is positive because you're in Banished and you want to get that shift. The thing is, like, Banished can likely be a clan, you know, in Monster Train 2, the dynamic usually shifts away from trying to just stack a floor up top, but Banished can kind of get away with it. And in that case, Rising Rage, on top of just being able to overstack your floor, it just provides an additional shift if you're done overstacking. So it's like it just continues to find value, whereas a Hidden Passage may not actually find value sometimes after you've already overstacked your floor. Then you're typically just using it to displace enemies, which Rising Rage can already do with that as well. And the advance usually is really good in that case as well. So it's just a very versatile card. We're going to give it a take ability of 8. The only reason I wouldn't give it a higher take ability is there's just, as I said, a lot of runs you don't actually want to like focus on the top floor, and in those runs it's not really going to be that good for you. It still might be okay. You can still split like maybe bottom floor and top. That's not uncommon for me to do with Banished. You know, I just have a middle floor that's kind of a staging area to overstack your top floor, but still have a bottom floor to kind of do whatever it's doing. So it's still pretty takeable, but it's not always takeable. The ceiling is 10. I mean, being able to get a really wide overstacked floor with Banished can be pretty wild. Or even with some of the other clans, like think like Ekka with Moon Cycle. If you can get like a bunch of Moon Cycle on the floor, you'll just get so many stats to that floor. But the floor, not to be confused with the other floors we're talking about, the floor rating of this card, we're going to give a 7. It's not super high. It's always going to be somewhat useful just to be able to displace enemies with it at the very least. So we're saying the floor is like we took it, but we kind of abandoned an overstack strategy. In that case, you're still able to use it to shift your top floor, and you're still using it to displace enemies, so it's not too bad. That's why it still gets a decently high score of 7 for the floor. And the median, we'll give it an 8, just because it's typically going to be valuable, but it doesn't likely hit that insane ceiling most of the time. And the upgrades you're going to want on it, you're going to want the intrinsic upgrade probably most of all. Especially if you're looking to overstack your floor, because then you can just deploy your units out how you want, and then the turn 1 you're guaranteed to already get them all on the same floor. Another upgrade you might want is Spell Chain. That way you can combine it with Intrinsic, and it then allows you to stack 2 units immediately, or Spell Chain with it. Even if you're just stacking 1 unit up, it can make the advance less awkward, because then you can just advance another unit back in front of it if you're like advancing a weak unit, or like a defensively weak unit to the front initially. And obviously Ember Reduction is always good with it. And Permafrost is not horrible on it. I typically don't like to spend money on Permafrost upgrades because I feel like it's not worth, you know, the 90 to 100-ish gold that it takes. But there are some of these cards that are good candidates for Permafrost, and Rising Rage is definitely one of them. Particularly if you don't find Intrinsic on it. It's maybe the next best thing. Or if you can't play all of your units out in your deployment phase, it's also good in that situation, because then you're going to have to redraw some of the units and play them. Or if you want to overstack units that are not priority draw banner units, you know, not the ones that you find in the deployment phase, such as, you know, the Hymnus would be a great example of that. In those cases, Permafrost is pretty good, because then if you draw it before them, it's just sitting in your hand, and you can, you know, stack your Hymnus at that point. And then, so that's Rising Rage. Then we go over to Pyreborn. And where are you? Alchemy. Alchemy is just a very solid card. I'm going to give it a take ability of 9. It would be pretty close to 10 on take ability, other than sometimes you just already have better options of Dragon Horde gain, but that's pretty rare, because this is a common. Keep in mind, we also kind of rate these in the context of what their rarity is. So common cards are, if you didn't know this, they're always going to show up in the first 2 rings only, and then they never show up beyond that, outside of some edge cases with like Cavern events. But Alchemy is typically showing up in the rewards of the first or second fight, so or your starting cards. So usually you won't have a better option. Like a better option would be something like, I would say, the you know, if I switch really quick over to equipment, the Soul Smelter. That can usually single-handedly get you an entire max horde limit all on its own, and sometimes you do find an uncommon in the first 2 rings or something, and in those cases, you know, those rare cases, then Alchemy is not really needed. That's why I guess I'm giving it a 9 instead of a 10, but I could still probably lean it toward a 10. But yeah, so, and the other option would be is if you really just predict that you can't play it, like if you have a really, really, really weak start, which does happen somewhat often with Pyreborn, because Pyreborn has some pretty dud banner units to start with, like Miser. It can be a pretty rough start if that's your starting banner, and you might go into like your Ring 1 rewards with like 5 Pyre health or something, and in that case it's pretty hard to justify taking the Alchemy. But, you know, outside of those edge cases, it's just always going to be almost the best thing to take, because it's such an easy way to stack Dragon Eggs. Now we're going to give it a ceiling of 8. You know, it doesn't have quite the ceiling of something like a Soul Smelter, but the ceiling would be that you just get Consume Remove and like a -2 Ember upgrade to go with it. At that point, it's 1 Ember for 2 eggs. That's incredibly good. I could even maybe bump the ceiling up to a 9 there. In that case, you're pretty much getting, even with just one of these alchemies, as long as you draw it 3 times and play it, you're getting a free artifact every fight, along with gold, along with minor artifact on top of that. So that's just like really, really solid. And then the floor, I'm going to give it a 6. The floor is like you took it and you just never, the fights didn't go well and you just couldn't play it, and you never could upgrade it. It's still like a card that you probably play here and there, and it still finds value. That's why I'm not giving it a super low floor, but it's definitely not a high floor, so we'll say a 6 for the floor. And then a median will give an 8. I think I'm typically just, like I said, I'm typically getting, even if I don't get Consume Remove, maybe I get an artifact every other fight then with an alchemy, right? That's just like super valuable. One of the best ways to play Buyer-Born is to be greedy, and this is one of the premier greed cards. And really the only upgrades I would typically be looking for in this would be just Ember Reduction and Consume Removal. I could maybe say that Permafrost is somewhat takeable on it. I wouldn't really do it, but another one I might take on it sometimes is Holy Stone. You know, like I said, sometimes you just have a bad start and you take a bunch of fire damage, but maybe I still had it in my opener or something, and in that case I'm not super opposed to taking a Holy Stone, because then I can leave it at 3 Ember, and it's a little bit easier to play at 3 Ember because I'm getting 3 heal. Keep in mind, Holy Stone, you can technically take Holy Stone twice on a card, and then if you do that on Alchemy, it actually heals you for 6, and that's pretty good. Pyre health is pretty important in Monster Train 2, especially once you start taking on the true final boss of the game, which is the Titans, where you're pretty much taking guaranteed pyre damage outside of a few edge cases, like being able to heal is not horrible. So Alchemy comes in at number whatever it is that 8? Yeah, number 8 was Alchemy. So next one on the list is going over to the Shroom guys, the Underlegion, Rot. Rot is similar in this. It's kind of like not all super different from Monster Train 1, the concept of a card like Ritual of Battle, where it's like pretty expensive for what it does in its vanilla form, but it's very easy in Monster Train games to hit merchants and just reduce the ember of cards, and when you do that, then Rot becomes pretty good. It's pretty easy for me to get it down to a 1 or a 2 cost, and you know, at that point, Decay, you know, even just it's just a versatile card. Like and it is a common card, and that's a great time to get it because it's at its most powerful in the early to mid game. It is a card that does kind of fall off in the late game in some cases, but I've had plenty of runs. Like you probably see the previous video I uploaded where, like, even in the late game, if I did not have Rot, there's no way I would have beat it. It is just often the extra damage that you need to be able to get through things with Underlegion, because Underlegion, they're pretty good at applying AoE damage, but they're not super great at dealing with tanks some of the time. You know, sometimes they are, but sometimes they aren't, and Rot is going to go a long ways to helping you with that. It also helps quite a lot with bosses. It's just a ton of damage over time. And so the rating, we're going to give it a 9 for takeability. It's pretty rare, if I don't already have a Rot, that I would see a Rot and skip Rot. I am almost always going to take it, unless I have really big reasons to take something else. Like if I'm really looking for some rally cards, then maybe I can take them over a Rot, but typically speaking, it's rare that I will skip a Rot if I see one, unless I started with 2 Rots in my opener. The ceiling, I'm going to give a 7. The ceiling just isn't like super high with this. It does take several upgrades to get going, but it also is benefiting from pretty easy upgrades to get. The best situation, I think, is to either get it to a 1 cost or to get it to a 2 cost with double stack. And those are going to be the upgrades that we're looking for, either double stack or just ember reductions. I could even say Consume Remove if I pair it with the -2 ember and Consume Remove. That's like pretty common for me to do. It's also a really good Hellvent target, Empyrean Well target, basically a duplication target. It's just nice to kind of have a card that you know will get value out of a duplication map event. We're going to give it a ceiling of 7. I think I already said that. We're going to give it a floor of 8. I think the floor, it's overcosted, but it's not like it still doesn't provide a ton of value. Even playing it for 3 in the early game is going to kill any tank in the early game. It's going to kill any tank in the mid game too. And it's probably going to kill any of the early bosses almost completely on its own. So it's just a really, really solid bread and butter card. It's not super sexy, but it's definitely solid. And we'll give it a median of 8 as well, just for similar reasons. And then we're going on to back to Banished. And now I feel like we're starting to step it up a little bit. Those first picks were really just solid, but they're not like sort of wowing me. Whereas this next pick kind of starts to wow me, and that's Cleave. Cleave is just a wild card most of the time. It's some of the best flat AoE damage that you could ever hope to have. And it can pretty much single-handedly solve so many issues in the game. You know, it does technically play off of your front unit, but you're very often with Banished wanting to put a unit in front and stack Valor on it. And Valor's naturally going to give it a pretty good amount of attack, so it's like this thing just sort of has built-in huge damage to it. I'm going to give it a take ability of 9. It's like, even if you don't currently think that the Cleave will work for you, it's kind of worth taking still, just speculatively, because it's probably going to work out. And even if it doesn't, you know, that hopefully means something else worked out, but most of the time it is going to work out. You know, you're going to have a good target for it. I mean, even if you don't get a great target for it, it's still like really strong AoE, and it's not like super expensive at a 2 cost. They could probably nerf this to a 3 cost, honestly, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happens eventually. But so we're going to give it take ability of 9. We're going to give a ceiling of 10. Like I said, it kind of can just solo carry a run a lot of the time. I mean, if I can get a unit up to, you know, the ceiling would be that I have a unit that has a lot of attack, and that I also get the upgrades that I want on it. So I could get like a holdover on it, or I could get a spell chain on it. In either of those cases, I'm going to be having just it literally clear the entire floor. So it doesn't really get much better than clearing an entire floor of every enemy on it, right? So that's definitely a ceiling of 10. Now I'm going to give it a floor of 6, because like I said, it is a card you might take speculatively sometimes, and sometimes you just don't end up with a deck that can reasonably frontline a dude that has high attack. And in that case, it's still okay. We're giving it a floor of 6 just because it's kind of an expensive like card similar to like Glimmer or something that doesn't heal. Maybe it's similar to like a Hallowed Drip or whatever. What is that Melting Remnant card from Monster Train 1? The 2 cost AoE cards. This is kind of like that at some point, where it's just not doing a whole lot of damage. It's still clearing backliners though, most likely. And I suppose if we were to be really facetious, the absolute floor would be that your units get so sapped that they have no attack at all, and then in that case it's not actually doing any damage. So I guess that's technically can bring the floor down as well. I'm going to give a median of 8 though. In most runs, this is going to provide you quite a lot of value. Even if it doesn't solo carry the run, it's going to provide a ton of damage over the course of a run. The upgrades you're looking, I think Holdover is probably the biggest one. If you can't get Holdover, Spell Chain's the next best thing. Ember upgrades you typically always want, because at 2 it is pretty expensive, but if you can just get it down to a 1, that's pretty nice. I also don't mind Intrinsic on it. Sometimes I'm just looking to deal with like the first wave, and then I can scale up other things and I don't need the Cleave. Good example of that would be like Spike's Kale. If Spike's Kale, if you end up leaking the first wave, you kind of just die. They may rebalance that fight at some point, but in the current iteration of it, you are just kind of going to die if you leak that first wave. especially if they leak at a high amount of health. But an intrinsic cleave can pretty much shut that down. And it's also not a horrible permafrost target. Like I said, like, the nuts is to get holdover on it, but if you can't get that, just having it guaranteed to be there for when you need it is pretty good. Because not every wave will need to get cleaved, but if you can have it for like the really troublesome waves, then that's pretty good. And then the next on our list, we're going over to Luna Coven, Phase Blessing. And really I could put Phase Blessing or Tidal Turning here, but I'm choosing Phase Blessing just because it'll end up in your deck much more often, I think. A, because it's a common, but B, just because it's a little more easy to build around because it is a common. You know, you're finding it earlier, you're finding it more often. It's just something that simply having it in your deck, you've got a pretty good idea that your defense is completely solved. So I'm going to give it a takeability of 9. It's a card that needs Conduit to really shine, you know. But most Luna Coven runs are going to have some degree of Conduit, and many of them are going to have a lot of Conduit. And if you have a lot of Conduit, and then you can, and if you also can like attune this card, then you're looking at hundreds upon hundreds, sometimes even thousands of armor, literally, from this card, which is insane. I mean, yeah, defensively it solves pretty much the game for you most of the time. So, ceiling is 10. The ceiling is, like I said, that it gets any number of good Conduit and or attuned, and it just literally, and you can like spell chain it or hold it over or both, and you just completely armor up your entire floor. Now, conversely, this card's going to have the lowest floor rating for any of the cards in my top 10. I'm going to give it a floor of 2, because it's such a good card, you may often take it speculatively before you've really secured forms of Conduit. And if you don't find Conduit, it's not so good. You can still kind of salvage it by adding like a plus 10 spell damage upgrade to it, or a plus 20 like a Surge Stone. That kind of salvages it, and it's still like an okay card at that point. But I'm saying that the floor is that I didn't find Conduit and I did not upgrade the card. In that case, it's a pretty useless card. If it's literally just only a 5 heal or a 5 armor for 1 Ember, that's pretty crappy. That's basically not a card at that point. So it does have a pretty low floor. It's just typically not going to hit the floor. It's typically going to hit the ceiling or the median. And we'll give it a median of 8, because even if I don't get a ton of Conduit, or I never attune it, or I never get the upgrades I want on it, it still might provide me like 20 or 30 armor for 1 or 0 Ember, which is plenty fine. You know, that's plenty good defense. Plus it can heal on top of giving armor. It's very versatile in that regard. So the upgrades you're going to want on it are Spell Chain, Ember Reduction, Holdover, or plus 10 spell damage. That's typically what you're looking for on this, which is a nice spread of upgrades, you know? It just means it's very easy to actually upgrade this card. And then we go over back to my favorite group, the Lazarus League, and we're going to get this first one here, Spike of the League. Reanimate is a strong contender for strongest buff in the game. You know, it really solves so many issues, especially in regards to like Relentless, but it also is just something that can give you a game plan, especially if you're like stacking like unstable on your own units. Give me 1 second. Alright, sorry about that, but to finish my thought on Spike the League, you know, often you're wanting to like either stack your unit with a bunch of spikes with something like Faulty Body, or stack them with unstable, with any of the plethora of ways to stack unstable on your units. And then you just want to basically make it so they keep coming back to life as much as possible. And Spike the League is the best card in the game to do that as far as spells go. There are some equipment that might outdo it, but that'll be another video for another time. Let's see. What did I rate this one? Yeah, for this one, I'm saying takeability of 10. It's pretty much always takeable. I will literally take this card. It is one of those cards, since it is a Spike event, you can find it even when you're playing other clans or other clan combos that don't have Lazarus in them. You can still find it from caverns. I even take it in those scenarios because it is that good. So it's like, even in a deck that doesn't really do Lazarus things, it's still just incredibly useful to basically get that many extra hits out of whatever unit you're putting it on. So it's super versatile, super takeable, definitely a 10 on takeability. And I'm going to also give a 10 for the ceiling. The ceiling is that you get some good upgrades, like you would want either consumer move or double stack, along with some ember reduction, and maybe some intrinsic. All or any of the above. It's a good spread of what can make it good, but so you get the upgrades you want, and then you also just have like a unit that benefits from reanimate in a big way. For example, one that has a bunch of unstable on it. Because then it can just keep dying and it will keep exploding over and over and over again, and it literally solves the game entirely. I mean, that not only is that a huge flat AoE damage, it's also at that point, you know, just even taking care of like reanimating enemies or damage shielded enemies. So the ceiling's definitely a 10 as well. The floor, I'm going to give it a 7. The floor is probably the only weak part of this card. It's still not overall weak. 7's still a good rating, but it isn't a card that shines for its floor necessarily, because the floor is, it's usually basically going to be like basically like a Forevermore serum. You're just playing it for in the vanilla form and just getting... And maybe you also just don't have a lot of extra ember to throw around, so you're not able to like really power in the reanimate on it. That's why it's not a super high floor. And we'll give it a median of 9 though, because it usually just performs super well. And I would even say, you know, we're in the top 4 now. I listed Spike the League at 4th best. I really think number 4 through 2 could really be interchangeable, but I do think they're a cut above the rest. Just like Cleave and Phase Blessing were kind of a cut above the first 4 that we listed. I think we're kind of entering another territory here now, starting with Spike of the League, where it's like now we're like into the real S tier cards, I would say. Like S plus tier cards, as far as spells go. I hope I mentioned at the start of this video that I'm only going over spells, by the way. I'm not going over units or equipment or anything like that. That'll be another video. And then next on the list is back to Banished. Benediction, where are you? Benediction. Benediction's just... really good card. It's also, I think, the only card that I technically have a 100% win rate that I've taken a significant amount of times, so that's definitely not something to ignore. All of these cards have a high win rate for me, but I think Benediction actually has a distinction of having a 100% win rate. And, you know, that could just be due to some variance, but it just shows that the card is very, very solid when you take it, and I take it a lot. I'm going to give it a takeability of 8. The only reason I'm not ranking the take ability higher is it does cost a lot in the vanilla form, and it's mainly defensive focused, and there are just going to be a decent amount of runs where you just don't need defense because it's already solved. Banished is pretty good with defense a lot of the time. You know, they have a lot of damage shield, they have armor in the form of Valor and just actual armor. And they have ways to prevent damage on top of that. So it's not like it's just always going to have to be taken. If you don't have a need for defense, you shouldn't really take it. I wouldn't really take it specifically just for the Valor. It's not enough Valor to really say that it's enticing to take for that. I'm mainly taking it for the damage shield. But the Valor is just a nice plus on top of it. The ceiling I'm going to give a 9. It's not quite at a 10 because it's like, you know, it's at the end of the day, it's like, it's kind of funny because it's like Gem Trove from Monster Train 1, more or less, but it just turns out that it's a lot more needed in Monster Train 2 to get like AoE damage shield, and it's just easier to make it work. You know, double stack in Monster Train 1 also came with an Ember increase, whereas in Monster Train 2 it doesn't. So like these cards that benefit from double stack are a lot easier to make work. And you know, even if I don't double stack it, it's just easy to get it down to a 1 cost card, and at that point 1 cost to give damage shield to everything is plenty fine. Or I can make it like a 2 cost and spell shield it. There's a lot of options to make cards like this really pop off in Monster Train 2. So mainly it's just there to like ensure that you're never dying, because you can keep your entire floor alive. I'm actually going to give a floor of 10 to this card. I think that if you took it for a reason, and if you never upgrade it and you just leave it as its vanilla form, it's still going to do what it does, and it's going to do it well. So it's not a card I think you're typically just speculatively taking necessarily. It's like you kind of predict, you kind of know if you need Benediction or not. You usually do, especially depending, like if I would say 1/3 of the time you're facing Seraph Dominion, and another third of the time you're facing Seraph of Savagery, for example. Both of those fights have some ridiculous AoE damage components, especially the Savagery fight. So you're likely to want this card most of the time just on that alone, right? And we'll give it a median of 10 as well. It just always kind of just has value. Very, very solid card. And it's kind of funny, like if I compare it against Sanctuary, I just think it's better, right? But it's an uncommon, right? And we kind of rank it in the context that it's an uncommon as well, right? Instead of a rare. But Sanctuary is a very good card too, but it doesn't make the top 10 list because Benediction, for the same cost, sure, I get less damage shield, but I do get some Valor, so it gives some damage to the floor. The wider the floor, the more that turns into damage, but more importantly, it doesn't consume, so I have a little bit more value in my ability to redraw it, and I don't have to find a consumer move for it to be valuable. So Benediction comes in at the 3 slot there, and the upgrades that I'm looking for it are double stack, Ember Reduction, Holdover sometimes, and Intrinsic. Intrinsic to take care of like this with Intrinsic is such a great way to help with like the Savagery Seraph that has like giant amounts of AoE coming in. And then at the number 2 slot, we're going back to Pyreborn, and for this one we are looking at Make It Rain. Make It Rain, baby. A very incredible card. May not be obvious how good it is when you first glance at it, but all it takes is a few times of drafting it and using it to realize how insanely good this card is. This is a card that can kind of single-handedly pull you out of a losing situation. I've had plenty of Pyreborn runs where I just was not gonna win, and then I have found a Make It Rain, and it saved the entire run. Like, it just solves so much. It's kind of like Cleave, but it's just a lot easier to make work. You know, it's already a 1 cost. Sure, you do have to spend gold, but it's not that much gold, and you're Pyreborn, so you're gonna have gold, right? And here's the thing, a lot of times I will take it, and I just don't. I take it for the end game, even if I find it in like the mid game, and I just don't have to play it necessarily in the mid game. It's okay to just have it sit in the deck and not spend the gold when you play it. If you do find that you're kind of gold starved or you want to be greedy and not play it, that's totally fine, because where it really shines is like ring 7 and beyond. I would say ring 6 as well. I mean, Kael, as we've kind of mentioned, if you don't have good flat AoE, Kael can really run you over, either the Vampiric or the Spikes variant. If they get enough Gorges on their dude and they leak through to your Pyre, you're going to take a ton of damage. Or even just the Relentless round where he spawns a bunch of Cherubs. Just having like a Make It Rain to be able to deal with that is super good. The nice thing about Make It Rain is it kind of is just good on its own, but it's even greater if you have some like synergies with it, and it has a lot of things that it synergizes with. So takeability, I'm going to give it a 10. I could even give it an 11 out of 10 on the takeability. I'll defy the laws of math. I will say this: if you don't have a Make It Rain in your deck and you see one, and you don't even immediately have any idea that it could be good for you, you're still probably correct to take at least one of these. Just having one in your deck is such a nice safety valve to really, you know, you might get caught by a wave that you never predicted was going to be so bad, and Make It Rain can just delete the wave in a lot of cases, or at least hurt them enough that you survive. So takeability of 10 or 11 if we want to defy math. I'm going to give it a ceiling of 10. The ceiling is that like there's kind of 2 big ways to get the ceiling out of it. The ceiling would be that I can stack a lot of Pyrogel to a floor, and if I can do that, keep in mind this thing strikes 4 separate times. I don't think, you know, it's a flat AoE that strikes 4 separate times. Let that sink in. So take whatever Pyrogel you have, times it by 4, and then on top of whatever spell damage you've added to the card, and that's what you're getting. It's an insane amount of damage. I very often, if I have enough Pyrogel in a run, Make It Rain translates to like killing the boss, like a flying boss such as Seraph. I can kill it within like a few waves, especially if I can like spell chain this thing. You know, we said it hits them 4 times vanilla, right? But what if I spell chain it? What if I spell chain it with an Emote Tome, right? It's just an insane amount of damage when you're hitting the ceiling with this card. And then the other thing that could happen is you pair it with some spell damage, especially in the form of like Conduit. So if you have like a big Conduit deck, it's pretty hard to beat this. I mean, you're gonna, and then maybe you can attune it as well, right? You can add it. There's ways to add attuned to the card, and in that case, it's not only deleting the waves, like it'll delete the waves, no problem, but it will literally delete the boss too. It can just delete the boss. So definitely a 10 for the ceiling. And for the floor, I'll give it a 9. The floor, the only reason I'm not giving it a 10 is because it does cost money to play it. And if I run out of money, then it's not going to be able to repeat the effect. And also just, if I don't want to lose money and I'm trying to be greedy, then I might be incentivized to not play it. That's the only reason I'm not giving it a 10 for the floor. And the medium, I'm going to give it a 10. This card just always performs. It's like such a takeable high performance card. It actually, I did say my number 1 is pretty solid, but I could say that this is also pretty solid as my number 2. And it's not too far off of my number 1. Now you can go ahead and make your guesses for my number 1, and in the meantime I'm going to do a quick, and yeah, so the upgrades I want on it, I really like a plus 10 spell damage, because keep in mind that's plus 10 times 4, so it's actually 40 spell damage. I like holdover on it, I like spell chain on it, I like ember reduction on it, and I don't mind a permafrost on it even. All of those upgrades are good on it. So before we get to our top 1, what would any top 10 list be without like a bunch of, we'll say like 10 or more honorable mentions. So I'm gonna just breeze through these. Let's go over to Lazarus League first. The first one I'm gonna do, I'm kind of cheating with this one, but I'm gonna say Secret Ingredient. I thought it was just worth mentioning what I think is by far the strongest starter card in the game. Similar to Mixology being good, the Secret Ingredient is also very good. It's just such a versatile card. For every single reason that I listed Mixology as good, the same thing applies to Secret Ingredient. It's just such a powerful starter. It can single-handedly handle like the first 2 rings of combat, I would say. You could throw any potato at it, and I can stack a bunch of rage, I can stack a bunch of lifesteal, I can stack a bunch of damage shield, I could stack a bunch of reanimate, I could use the unstable to kill collectors and clear entire backline waves. I can use the sap to also, or the sap line to like apply melee weakness, or rooted to like tanks. It literally just solves like every problem in the game if you know what you're doing. And maybe the luck won't be on your side sometimes, but you should be able to tweak the RNG in your favor most of the time. So I'm not going to give it a rating for takeability, obviously, because it's a starter card, but the rating I will give it for the ceiling is 8. You can actually just, what I like to do is zero cost as many of these as I can and add spell chain to them, and that can single-handedly just give you a game plan. It can give you a way to get reanimate pretty consistently. It can give you a way to get scaling consistently. It can be a way to do everything that I just listed off consistently, especially if you're spell chaining it and increasing your odds to find the things that you want to find. And then I'll just say floor 9, median 8. Maybe I won't talk too much on these honorable mentions because I only have so much time here. And then the next one is Explosive Reaction. It's just a really solid card that can do a bunch of stuff. Unstable is probably the most powerful debuff in the game in my opinion, other than maybe DK, but of the new debuffs. Obviously stuff like Daze is good and whatnot, but yeah, it's solid because you can put it on an enemy, you could put it on your own unit. In either case, it's going to be a good play almost always. It takes upgrades pretty well, and even in the vanilla form, it's not too bad. We'll give it a takeability of 9, ceiling of 9, floor of 8, median of 7. Upgrades are double stack, ember reduction, and sometimes intrinsic. And then Forevermore Serum. This card's interesting because it's mainly getting it for the floor and the takeability. I'm going to give it a takeability of 10. It's just literally always good, no matter what, to take this. But the ceiling we're going to say is a 7, maybe a low 7. It's not going to stack a ton of reanimate. It's just going to kind of get you started on it and be able to supplement it. It does take some upgrades pretty well. It takes consumer move. It takes double stack, it takes spell chain, and ember reduction. All of those are going to be good for it. So the floor is high. We're going to give it a floor of 9, but a ceiling of 7, just because it can't like hyper stack reanimate super cleanly. And we'll give it a median of 8. And then Replicator Ray. I'll throw Mind of Its Own in as well. Both of them are kind of similar. It's like you kind of have to have equipment and units that can target this pretty well. We'll give them a takeability of 6. They're not super takeable, which is why they did not make my list. Not takeable on the level of like my top 10. They do get a ceiling of 10 though. The ceiling on these cards is insane. Just being able to either duplicate your units or have them immediately attack. And in some cases, you know, you can upgrade it to get spell chained so that you can do its effect multiple times. Like, it's just pretty wild. But we'll give them a floor of 5 because, you know, if you're speculatively taking these and it just doesn't work out, they're pretty expensive, useless cards in your deck at that point. And I'm not gonna go into upgrades or anything because I'm running out of time here. But let's go over to Luna Coven. We have Tidal Turning, which is a very similar card to the Phase Blessing. It's a rare, so maybe it doesn't make my 10 because of that. It's like I'm expecting it to be pretty good if it's a rare, which it is, but it's maybe just not good enough to enter my top 10 because it does consume and it does cost 3. So in the vanilla form, it's still good, but it's not like super amazing. It does require upgrades to probably really shine. But yeah, it's AoE, healing, and armor. That's obviously very good. And then I would add Heavenfall to it as well. I don't think it's very takeable a lot of the time because it costs so much. But I don't know. As long as you can get some Ember reductions, or if you have like, you know, Volatile Gauge or some Ember upgrades yourself, like Ember Boss upgrades, then you're probably looking at a pretty good card that can just not only clear the floor you're on, but every floor. It's a glorious card to witness when it actually pops off. I just don't think it pops off all the time. Sometimes you think you can make it work and it doesn't actually really work because it does cost a lot. And you do kind of need to be in a deck that can utilize playing it on the full moon and have some conduit maybe to supplement it with. But it's definitely a good card. And then Ritual Tome also I think is pretty good. Titans being able to, especially if you can get like Consume Remove, Double Stack, Spell Chain, stuff like that on it, you can make a unit basically invulnerable with this. The only thing that will kill it at that point is like high amounts of corruption, which is a thing, but considering it kind of solos the rest of the game, it's just really good in that regard. And then for Pyreborn, I would say that Tome of Contacts is up there. You know, it can basically make a unit that normally has a high cooldown or even a medium cooldown. It can make it so they're able to use their ability every single turn. So you can have something like Lord Phoenix able to use its ability every turn, and if you go like the Slay path, that's pretty much going to solve the game mostly for you. So there's definitely a high ceiling there. It just doesn't always find pay dirt because you don't always have a unit that has abilities or an ability that you care to use it on. And then the other one would be Pyroclasm. It's similar to Heavenfall in that it does cost a lot, but it just sort of goes in there and does something, and it does something very well. You know, explosive and attuned, so it's like you can very easily clear the entire floor with it. And even if you don't clear the entire floor with it, you're doing like pretty much 150 damage to the whole floor. Even just getting some Ember reductions on it is pretty solid. But it is a card that does require some investment probably to make work because it is so expensive. And then for Underlegion, I could just lump most of these Propagate spells together, like Proliferate and Spike the Legion. They're mostly going to be good, they're just not always going to be good. It really relies on you having either some fun guy or some buffs or debuffs to want to propagate with. They're generally going to be very good, but not always. Not always, at least to the degree that I don't think they make my top 10. And then maybe I'll give one, since Banish doesn't have any honorable mentions, I'll give one to Tome of the Lost Path. It's basically like kind of a better version of Rising Rage, but it is a rare. So I don't know that it kind of gets the nod the way that a common card like Rising Rage does when they're pretty similar in power level, I would say. Tome is better technically. Like if they're faced against each other, I'm probably taking the Tome, but in the context of what their rarity is, I think Tome does not make my top 10. Okay, so now that I've done all of that, it's time to unveil the number one card, the number one spell card in the game. Of the new ones. You know, you probably see some spoilers here. We're not going over those ones, but of the new cards. Number one, in my opinion, Tome of Horrors. This card I'm going to give a take ability of 10 to. I'm going to give a ceiling of 10 to. I'm going to give a floor of 10. And I'm going to give a median of 10. 10s across the board. This card is so frickin' powerful, and it is definitely the best card in the game. I will not hear otherwise. It's so good. Let me explain why it's so good. Let's talk about the floor. What's the worst case scenario for this thing? The worst case is I take it and I don't have any merchant magics ahead of me, so I can't upgrade it. And I don't have any additional reanimate, so I can't like comfortably put it on my own unit. So in the very worst scenario, I'm just playing it for 3 on an enemy unit. Let's think back to Monster Train 1. Wasn't Inferno a pretty good card? You know, in Monster Train 1, we'll spoil a little bit here. Let's go over and look at Inferno. 3 cost, 100 damage to all the units. Hurts your own side, too. This card, in the context of, you know, playing it on an enemy that will die and then die again, does 100 damage to their whole floor, but not even your whole floor. So it's like literally better than Inferno, which is already one of the best cards in Monster Train 1, in the worst case scenario, which is to just play it vanilla at a 3 cost with no double stack, no consumer move or anything like that on an enemy. You know, backline enemy that it will kill. I don't think there's a wave in the game where something has more than 50 health. There should always at least be a target for this to hit. Usually speaking, maybe there's like one wave I'm forgetting about, but generally speaking, there's going to be some lower health unit you can just stick this on and it will just naturally do 100 damage to their floor. That's the worst case scenario. That's a scenario I barely ever run into. Almost always I'm able to make this thing pop off and just put it on my own units and just solve the entire game. You know, any potato in the game, I can throw this on. Literally a potato. Put it on a train steward, and I can win the game with a train steward. I've won plenty of times putting this on a train steward. And just to prove a point. Or in one case, I accidentally purged, you know, all of my units because I forgot that Void Binding with Reanimate does purge your units. Even though they survive, technically the fight, they're gone for the next fight. And I've still won those runs because I luckily had some train stewards left over. Or spear stewards or whatever, and you know, I just stuck Tome of Horrors along with a bunch of other stuff on them, and it wins. So, you know, you just put it on your own units, and you stack Unstable, and you stack Reanimate, and you just delete the entire game of enemies. Like, nothing can stop you once you get to a certain threshold of Unstable. I would say, generally speaking, anywhere from like, I don't know, between 100 and 200 unstables, all you really need, as long as you can supplement that with enough reanimate. You know, the tanks in this game are usually between 400 to 500 health in the end game, and if they hit you multiple times, you know, it will proc multiple reanimates, but it'll just kill them. The thing is, usually I get even higher than 200 unstable. If I can get double stack on this thing or a consumer move, either one of those, and I can just Hellvent it 1 or twice, you know, if I can dupe it once or twice, then that's GG. That's all I need to win the game. I will just stack upwards of 200 or more unstable on my units, and they'll have reanimate on top of that. And hope, I can usually supplement that reanimate with other forms of reanimate. Secret ingredients, good enough, usually. Mixology, or, Spike the League, Organ Harvester. If I go over to the equipment, the Organ Harvester is another culprit that I could maybe just stack reanimate with. So as long as I can just keep my reanimate up, it's going to be incredibly powerful. And even if I even if I do somehow run out of reanimate, I still at least probably dealt with almost every wave in the fight by then. So to me, it's the best spell in the game. It's maybe even the best card in the game. Tome of Many Horrors, or Tome of Horrors. I always call it Tome of Many Horrors. I don't know if maybe that's what it should be called, because that does sound cooler, doesn't it? But anyway, it benefits from double stack, it benefits from consumer move, it benefits from ember reductions. Sometimes it can even benefit from spell chains, especially if you're using something like Volatile Gauge with it or something like that. Benefits from everything. Even a Permafrost sometimes. Even a Holy Stone. Just whatever. Slap whatever on this thing and it's going to do good. But ideally, you want double stack or consumer move, or both. I either want to consumer move it and then bring it down to a 1 cost, or I want to double stack it, and it's still good if I can't remove the consume while I double stack it. I can just bring it down to a 2 cost. However, I think the ideal form of this card is to double stack it and consumer move. That's like the nuts. Then you're able to get 100 unstable and 2 reanimate out of it and have it replayable. That's just really good. But yeah, I think I've blabbered on long enough. That is my early takes here on what the best spell cards are in Monster Train 2. The best new ones, shall we say. Anyway, though, as always, thanks for watching. Let me know what your own top 10 are. There's no wrong answers here. It's all opinion, right? And as always, thanks for watching, and until next time, peace.